The Showdown cheat sheet is something that has evolved a ton over the course of the last year or so, and I am finally comfortable with where it exists. So I wanted to make sure to come through and do a tutorial because it is very complex and there is a lot going on here. So let's start with each one of these sections. So when you are on the Showdown cheat sheet, the top section of this is going to be a tournament leaderboard. This will update after each round of the current golf tournament. So after Thursday, you'll be able to come in and see the strokes gained data. Then after Friday, after the second round, you'll be able to update that information as well. So what you're looking at here is a tournament leaderboard from the Sony Open. So what this is doing is it's breaking down each one of the strokes gained metrics off the tee, approach, around the green, putting. Those are the four major ones. And then tee to green and total over here on the right-hand side. Now, this is a lot of data, so I was trying to figure out the best way to present this. And I might not have done the best job, but at least it gives you all of the information here. So what you can do is you can look at the golfer's tournament strokes gained off the tee and compare that to their off the tee baseline. So basically, how are they comparing to their average? And then what that difference is. So let's actually look at this here. So for Brendan Steele, off the tee in this tournament, he lost on average 0.09 strokes off the tee. His baseline, so what his long-term form usually is he actually gains about 0.43 strokes off the tee. So that means he is a half a stroke right here, 0.52, under his expectation. Okay, so what does that mean? To me, it means that if a golfer is below expectation for a specific round or a specific 2 rounds, for example, usually golfers come back to their average. So I would argue that there is still 0.52, a half a stroke per round off the tee that Brendan Steele could get back to his ceiling. This is different than just saying if golfers are usually good, or if they've lost off the tee or if they have gained off the tee. Because if a golfer is always losing off the tee, it should not be a surprise that he is also losing again here. For example, Graham McDowell in this tournament right here, he's the 5th one down, lost about a half a stroke off the tee per round, but he usually loses, 1/10 of a stroke. So he's a losing player either way. So you need to be able to identify kind of what the difference is between this tournament or this specific round and the golfer's actual baseline. So the way that I really like to do this, I like to sort by strokes gained tee to green, because I want guys that are putting, or I'm sorry, are getting onto the green really, really well. They're ball striking. They are putting themselves in position. And then I want guys that also are below their expectation for putting. So if you look at this, the way this reads is Kevin Kisner leads the field in strokes gained tee to green at 2.38 strokes per round. And he is basically a neutral putter for this tournament, 0.09. Now, the thing is with Kevin Kisner, he's a very good putter. So he usually averages about a half a stroke, 0.43 strokes gained per round. So that to me says this expectation number, he is basically a third of a stroke per round below his expectation. So when you do that over the course of 4 rounds, he basically lost, almost a stroke and a half on the greens putting that he normally would not. That is the way to read this. These numbers here are all their averages. So you can come through and adjust the rounds that you want to see here. So if you want to see the tournament data for only the first and second rounds, let's do the first, second, and third rounds here. Okay, so let's do the first and second, sorry. So here's what you've got. You have Cameron Davis, who, if you looked at this, would have been a pretty good play going into the weekend because he was gaining so many strokes tee to green, but was still a half a shot per round under his expectation. He was losing putting in a big way. Alex Noren, also on this list, right, was losing 0.69 strokes per round on the greens, but he is usually a slightly above average putter. So that's nearly a stroke per round. Joaquin Niemann burned a lot of guys. Kevin Kisner would have been on this list, and he played great on the weekend because generally speaking, these, especially in putting, these guys, putting is very volatile. If you get unlucky for the first couple of days, it is usually going to come back to you very, very quickly. So because I've broken the tournament strokes gained data out, their baseline out, and their expectation out, you can really sort by any one of these columns. So if you just want to see who the guys are, long-term form, who are the best tee to green guys in this field? Well, Justin Thomas, Scott Harrington, Hideki Matsuyama, Colin Morikawa. Like, you can just sort by that. If you want to sort by just the guys who are playing well in this tournament on, let's say, around the green, there you go. Hudson Swafford, Lanto Griffin, DJ Trahan. Or if you just want to sort these by, hey, who is getting the luckiest at putting? Well, there's Brendan Steele. He's about 3.8 shots on average, just over 2 rounds above his expectation. Corey Connors, well above his expectation. Those guys tend to come back down to earth. Keegan Bradley, above expectation. Or you can go the other way and say, give me the guys who are the most below expectation. Andrew Landry was a complete disaster, but he was losing 2.5 shots per round under his expectation, under his baseline. He didn't play well tee to green. So you can kind of see, like, if you look at this, you can just say, wow, Justin Thomas, who ended up missing the cut, really unlucky here. He played really well tee to green, 1.8 shots gained tee to green in this tournament, but was basically 5 shots, 2.3 shots per round through 2 rounds under his putting expectation. He's going to be just fine moving forward because he's not going to lose 5 shots putting over the course of 2 days very often. He is a much more neutral putter, as you can see by this number right here. 0.17 is his baseline. So this is a lot of data. I highly encourage you to kind of mess around with this and see what works for you, because you can sort by any column here. But what you can also do is you can choose any round or rounds. So if you're playing second round Showdown, you can just choose to see first round data and everything is going to update here. Or you can say, I want first and second rounds because I'm going to play the weekend slate or the third round slate. Or for whatever reason, if you only wanted to see the first and the third round, you could do that. Or the third and the fourth round, you could do that. Like, any combination of rounds or all of them would also work as well. And then this date slider here, this is the date range for what your statistical baseline is. So I don't know if you noticed, while I was hovering over the names, it was telling you how many measured rounds we have on these golfers. So Brendan Steele, 187 measured rounds. Cam Smith, 189. Kisner, 208. That's how many rounds we have in the database for those guys, measured rounds using ShotLink data. But you might say, hey, you know what? I want to make this more recent. I just want everything from 2019 on. So you can adjust the date range and you'll see, all the information down here is going to change. And then you can say, okay, Brendan Steele, that's 56 rounds. Cam Smith, that's 63. And Kevin Kisner, it's 69 rounds. So you can adjust this slider to get the date range for these golfers that you want, because maybe you want it to be more current, or maybe you want to look at long-term form. So there really are endless combinations that you can get here based on what you like and what you think is important, which I really love, which is something that did not exist in previous versions of this tool. Now, because that is a lot of information to kind of throw at you, what I tried to do is create this graph right here, which I'm calling it bounce back candidates, which essentially means which guys do I think, got unlucky for 1 round or unlucky for 2 rounds, something like that. Who is most likely to bounce back? And the idea behind this is, because putting is so volatile, that's usually the stat that tends to bounce back the quickest. So I want guys that are playing really well tee to green, but they are losing strokes well below their baseline in putting. And actually, let's just adjust this a little bit here, because when you adjust the date ranges and you adjust the rounds, it's also going to impact this these graphs down here. And then I'll go back and I'll make my date range probably closer to the full, let's just do, you know, the full 2019 year. So what you're looking at now is this. So if you came and looked at this after the second round, which is the filter, you know, that we have in here, you can look at, here are the list of the most likely bounce back candidates, which is basically determined by the guys who are gaining the most tee to green and losing the most putting based on their expectation. So that does not mean, like, you know, Hideki on here, if Hideki Matsuyama loses 2 strokes putting, he might not show up on this list. He might, but he might not, because he's like always losing 2 shots putting. It's remarkable for Kevin Kisner to show up on this list because he's a really good putter, and he was losing through 2 rounds 3.5 shots putting to his normal baseline. So that's why he is a, quote, bounce back candidate. So you can scroll through the guys that match that criteria. But then what I wanted to also do was create a visual for this. And I tried my best on this, where I broke the entire field down into quadrants. And across the x-axis down here at the bottom, I have the tournament, so the current tournament, strokes gained tee to green. Left is losing strokes, right is gaining strokes. Then up the y-axis, I have how many strokes that golfer is gaining or losing to their putting baseline, not for the week, but their week compared to what they would normally do. So I've also tried to put some little designations in the corners to show you which side is the side that you want to target here. So for example, the upper left-hand corner of this graph would be guys who are bad, who have been bad tee to green in this tournament and are actually gaining strokes to their putting expectation. They've been lucky putting. That is a terrible combination. So you look at Will Gordon, who, you know, in this tournament lost 3 strokes per round tee to green and was still putting 2 strokes per round over his expectation. That is a recipe for disaster, because he's playing poorly and he's getting lucky on the greens. That is terrible. So I would avoid these guys up here in the upper left-hand quadrant. In the bottom left, you have guys who are playing bad tee to green, but they've also been unlucky putting. So I'd probably avoid these guys too. But just to give you an example, Andrew Landry, you know, he's losing 2.7 strokes tee to green in this tournament, and he's also losing or 2.5 to his putting baseline. So I would expect that Landry, you know, his putting numbers would get better, but the fact that he's not striking the ball very well makes him a difficult guy to roster. Up here in the upper right-hand quadrant, these are guys who are playing well tee to green, which is good, but they are getting lucky at putting. And these are generally the guys you're going to see at the top of the leaderboard. So you have someone like Cam Davis, who, you know, through 2 rounds had gained 4.7 strokes tee to green, but was losing 1/3 of a shot to his putting baseline. So that is a guy that, and actually that's still a negative, so that's okay. But some of these other guys like Keegan Bradley here, Keegan's a good example, was gaining 1.7 tee to green, but also getting lucky on the greens to the tune of, you know, 2.5 shots per round. These are the guys that end up near the top of the leaderboard. These are kind of the guys that are like, you'd be buying high on. You would be looking at this and saying, okay, they're playing well tee to green and they're getting lucky. Should I invest in them? Probably not. You know, you would have to ask them to continue to putt well over the course, you know, above their expectation for the next couple of days, which, you know, we know in retrospect, like Ryan Palmer faltered a little bit on the weekend. Colin Morikawa fell out of it on the weekend. You know, Bo Hoag, Cameron Davis, all these guys actually kind of fell out of it because they were getting lucky on the greens. And then down here in the bottom right-hand quadrant, these are the guys that I would generally target. And this is obviously not a hard and fast rule, but guys who are playing well tee to green and they're getting unlucky putting. So Joaquin Niemann played awesome, right? Gained 2.6 shots tee to green in this tournament, which you can see is like, there's probably like 10 guys in the field that are better than him at this point. But getting unlucky on the greens, putting poorly, 2 strokes per round compared to his baseline. This is the type of golfer I would be targeting for the weekend. Hideki Matsuyama, same thing. Lanto Griffin is on here. Kevin Kisner is on here. They all did end up having good weekends. Justin Thomas missed the cut, so if there was a third round he was going to play, I probably would have rostered him, but keep in mind, he didn't make the cut here. But these are the guys that I would generally target because they should, being able to keep the ball striking going, tee to green, that's a little stickier. If they can keep that up, which they've already done for the first couple of rounds, and then you throw in, hey, maybe the putter gets back to just normal. You're not asking for them to do anything more than their average. You're just asking for them to do the average. There is a lot to make up for, and there's a lot of strokes there. So that's why I really like this quadrant, and I hope that it helps illustrate, some of the better targets. And then finally, as if that wasn't enough, I do like the idea of this round by round scoring. So this is not incorporating the current tournament. This is the, round by round. It's not their scoring average. It's their strokes gained total for each round. So if you look at this, you can say, okay, Justin Thomas, his average strokes gained total, he gains 1.8 strokes per round. Well, in the first round, he's basically exactly on that average. A little below average in second rounds, a little above average in third rounds, and a little above average in fourth rounds. But quite frankly, that's a very consistent golfer. If you sort by round one difference, what you're going to find is pretty interesting. And I want to get some guys with enough rounds here. Here's the perfect example, right? Keegan Bradley. Keegan's, total for his life, his total strokes gained is about a half a stroke per round. But for whatever reason, he goes nuts in round ones, which is 1.18 strokes gained per round in the first round of tournaments. He's got 63 first rounds that I have measured, which is 3/4 of a shot above his current of his normal expectation. Now, you'll notice he is a loser, and he probably has to be. He's a loser in strokes gained total over the second round, over the third round, and over the fourth round. That is what we always say about Keegan, right? He goes full Keegan, where he goes out, he could be your first round leader, then he can miss the cut, but he's definitely going to fade on the weekend. So he's a guy that I would want to consider for, round one showdown. Or Matt Kuchar. Matt Kuchar is always a guy who gets off to a really good start for whatever reason. In 56 or 57 round ones, he is also gaining like 3 strokes or 3/4 of a stroke more than he normally does. So you can see the sample sizes, some of them very small, 2 rounds, 1 round. Find guys with good sample sizes, and there really is something to, getting out early, playing in round one. Sometimes you'll find guys that play better in like round 2 or 3 because maybe they get more comfortable with the course. Now that they've made the cut, they're feeling good. Like Kramer Hickok, young guy, plays a lot, but his results are kind of mixed. He might be one of these guys that is like, wow, when I make it to the weekend, I can freewheel it, right? Like I've made the cut. I feel good about this. I'm getting a paycheck. And in his 10 rounds, his 10 third rounds, he is gaining 1.7 strokes more than his normal average, which is a massive number. Of course, it's a little bit of a small sample size, but you get what I'm going with here. There are guys who generally just play better later or earlier in the tournament, and I wanted to be able to show that to you. Now, the salaries that you're seeing here, this is the slate information. So you can change the slate. So if you're playing, round 1, you can see Justin Thomas is 10,800. Round 2, he's going to be 10,600. Round 3, now they give him a round 3 salary, but technically he didn't make the cut. But the way this happens is all these guys get salaries anyway because the slate comes out before the cut line is finalized. So keep that in mind. But you can see the salaries are changing. So that is what you're controlling. None of the other data down here is changing based on your selection up top here, but it should give you a really good idea of, just additional information. So if you see a guy hey, Joaquin Niemann, he's getting unlucky putting. He's playing well tee to green, and I know he's a good third round player. Maybe I fire him up for third round showdown. So there's a lot of information here. I encourage you to mess around with it. Let me know if you have any questions, but this should be a really good tool for you moving forward.